We got UFC 313 coming up this Saturday, so I just wanted to make some quick predictions for the main card. Starting with King Green versus Mauricio Ruffy, I think this is going to be an exciting fight due to both of their striking styles. You have Green, who's coming off the Paddy loss, but does have a fairly broad experience in the UFC, in MMA, and wrestling before that, and I would say that Green has definitely fought his big share of names in the lightweight division. He is a really great, well-rounded fighter. He can fight several ways, but I think the real thing that stands out for him is his evasive movements, his quick hands. He can really tag you quickly and then get out of the way, but he has shown some good takedowns and knees as well. So I would say that on one hand, while Green definitely has a lot of ways he can win, I wouldn't say he's really dominant in any one aspect, and he also has shown that he can lose fights in several different ways as well. And then going over to Ruffy, I think he isn't nearly as established in the UFC, but is going off a 6-fight win streak with 5 of those being knockouts. But of those wins, only 2 of those have been on the UFC in the big stage. So that has to be taken with a grain of salt. But looking at his style, he does have a pretty wide stance, and he does have a really big right hand and can generate a lot of torque. Also has a really strong jab as well, but I really think his knockout power is what stands out for Ruffy. We haven't seen as much of him on the ground. We have seen him present good takedown defense, but maybe this is only after dealing out a lot of damage. So I don't know how he would do maybe early on in the fight against a good grappler, but I don't know if Green is definitely that guy to really have enough elite grappling skill to do that. So I think even though we haven't seen him on the ground too much, we have seen his scissor sweep, for example, in his UFC debut, but I really think that his knockout power is the edge here. So if I had to make a prediction for this, I think that it's possible Green does try to take him down early to mix things up. But I do think that Ruffy is going to land a lot of the big shots right away. And I think doing this will allow him to control the fight and eventually stop Green. So I think even though Green can hold his own in terms of his striking, I think Ruffy will eventually land the bigger punches and will win by TKO. And then going over to the strawweight bout between Amanda Lemos and Yasmin Lucindo. Similar to the breakdown before, you have Lemos, who is more of the veteran, started in Brazilian kickboxing, but has faced her fair share of big names. And she has been really active recently, but with mixed results. Going back to her earlier UFC career, she did have an opening loss, but then went on a 5-win streak to really cement her name in the division. But again, I would say you would have more of a mixed bag in terms of her recent UFC performances. She is generally known for her striking, even though she has gotten some submissions, but generally isn't shown to be the best on the ground. But I'd say that Lemos really has good solid hands, does have significant knockout or knockdown power, and can definitely knock you off your feet with one punch. So I think Lucindo's definitely going to have to be careful here. And Lemos has been really durable throughout her career. She's only been knocked out once in 2017. But looking at Lucindo, she is a lot younger. And while she doesn't seem to have maybe as good of movement on her feet in terms of the striking, she still has heavy hands that she can land on her own once she digs in. But I wouldn't say she has nearly the striking capability of Lemos, but her big thing is her strong takedowns, a good ground and pound game, does have good kicks as well. And similar to Lemos, she did lose her UFC debut, but did go on a 4-fight win streak after that. So I think you have reasons for both of them that are promising going into this, but if I had to pick an outcome here, I think that Lemos is definitely going to be able to land the more precise punches in their exchanges, but I think I would have to give the edge to Lucindo in this, because I think even if she does get knocked down by Lemos probably isn't going to be able to finish her, because Lucindo is just so dominant on the ground. And given that Lucindo can trade well enough, I think she is a lot more versatile in this, and I think that she will take down Lemos at some point, and this is likely going to tire her out so that her power won't be as effective. And I think she likely could get a stoppage of some sort on the ground, or would do enough here to win a decision. So I probably would have to go Lucindo by unanimous decision. And then going to the other lightweight bout here, Jalen Turner and Ignacio Bahamondes. You have Turner on one end, who has a good amount of UFC fights so far. He's 29 currently, so he's in more of the middle of his career. And the real thing is for Turner is that he's really tall, I would say, for lightweights, and really long. 6'3", I would say, is pretty rare for a lightweight, and this obviously does give him a severe reach advantage. Looking at his career, he's never been submitted, and he hasn't won a decision, so he's either going to win mostly by knockout, does get an occasional submission as well, but he is someone who is going to stop you if he is going to win. But it seems like his style generally leans towards fighting mostly on his feet, but I think he has shown good takedown defense, and he's really able to leverage his height well on the ground. But his best weapon would be his strong power, but I would also say that he's really hard to submit as well. Does seem to show a weakness for ground and pound if you can get him there to begin with. But I think it's really hard to land on Turner since he can land such significant power himself. But looking at Ignacio Bahamondes, started his career off in kickboxing, pretty similar in age at 27. He's never been knocked out so far in his career, so I think that is something that is impressive. And even though Turner would have the height and reach advantage, I would say Ignacio is pretty long and tall for lightweights himself at 6'1" with a 75-inch reach. So I would think that Turner here really isn't going to have as significant of a height and reach advantage as he's used to. And I really think the thing for Ignacio is those great head kicks. He has shown the capability of knocking people out with this, and I really think he has such tremendous power that he can generate from his feet. Compared though to Turner, he probably hasn't fought as hard of competition yet, and we also haven't seen him on the ground that much either, but he does seem to also hold his own there and has occasionally been shown to be dangerous on the ground. But really his big thing is his striking. Does have good hands too, but I would say his real power is in a lot of those different kicks he can throw. So I think this is a pretty evenly matched bout, and I think with those similar body types in a heavy striking matchup, I think either of these fighters could be vulnerable to counters. So I could easily see this being the fight of the night, but I think it could really go either way at any moment. And I think even though Turner has the experience advantage, I think Bahamondes has just done a little bit better recently. And I think as opposed to striking with punches, I think it's a little bit harder sometimes to defend against strong kicks, just because you don't see that as often. So even though I do think this is going to be the hardest competition that Bahamondes has faced, I would have to give him the edge here because those kicks are just so vicious. So I would think that him at some point is going to get another knockout on some sort of a kick, or it's going to lead to a TKO. And then going to the co-main event, Justin Gaethje versus Rafael Fiziev. You have Gaethje coming off the Holloway loss, but these two did fight before. You had a majority decision for Gaethje, and we obviously know that Gaethje's known for his heavy hands. Has won 20 out of his 25 wins by way of knockout. He hasn't been as active lately, but I think he is likely looking to make another title run. And then you have Fiziev, who's stepping in last minute after the Dan Hooker hand injury, so I think that's significant in this. His style is pretty similar to Gaethje, though, in terms of being mostly a dominant striker with power, but he is coming off of 2 losses and didn't really fight last year, in addition to being a last-minute replacement. So I think even though there was a little bit of back and forth in that first fight, I think that heavily favors Gaethje in this, and I think it won't be quite as competitive as last time. And I think Gaethje could win a little bit more convincingly. I think since this is going to be a 3-round fight, I don't know if Gaethje's going to be able to do enough to stop him. So I would probably have to go Gaethje by unanimous decision. And I think it is also possible Gaethje is just a little bit more careful in this. And then for the main event, I think this is a lot closer fight than maybe expected. Alex Pereira and Magomed Ankalaev. You have Pereira, who's coming off of a 5-fight win streak since moving up to light heavyweight. He does have that Adesanya loss right before that, but has definitely been one of the more active UFC champions in recent time. Obviously, we have his longtime kickboxing backgrounds, and really the thing is, for Pereira is that immense power can knock you out through kicks, but his left hand is his best asset. And I would really say for Pereira, it is pretty unbelievable the streak that he has gone on since joining the UFC. So he's really taken it by storm as opposed to, I would say, the more standard UFC route. But I think you really have to look at Ankalaev in this. Did start a wrestling and combat sambo career, but he is really known for his striking. You only have his only loss on his record would be the submission to Paul Craig in 2018. So he's never been knocked out, which I think is a strong feat here. And I think you have had impressive wins from Ankalaev already in light heavyweight. This would be Thiago Santos, Anthony Smith, and Johnny Walker. And I would say like Pereira, he does really have great kicks and great punches. So he can really change the course of the fight in seconds. So I really think this is going to be a good test for both fighters. I think another interesting thing here is that both of them are southpaw, and we really haven't seen that either way. You have Pereira, who doesn't have as much experience against southpaws besides Jamal Hill, but I would say since that fight didn't really last too long, it's not like he got a lot of good rounds there. But I think Ankalaev hasn't really faced as many southpaws either, and in the few rare events that he did, he also got an early knockout, so I think they're both going to have maybe a little bit of an adjustment in terms of those styles, even though I'm sure they're both preparing for it. And I would say that they are also pretty similar in size. You have 6'3" for Ankalaev and 6'4" for Pereira, but Pereira would have a 4-inch reach advantage here. So I think the big question is going to be how Pereira can handle adversity for Ankalaev, because I think he's going to be one of the toughest fights he's had so far. And I think if we're looking at the Adesanya loss, that really asks the question of what is Pereira going to look like if he gets in trouble at a higher weight class. So I think this is a much more dangerous of a fight for Pereira than we've seen recently. And I would say as opposed to Townsend or Yuri, who maybe just aren't as threatening as Ankalaev is in terms of his striking power, that Pereira is really going to have his plate full here. But I would say flipping this on its head, I would say this is also the toughest opponent that Ankalaev has faced in his career. And I would say that we also have seen him get wobbled or dropped a few times in his fights before, even though he has been able to recover from that. I think if he's facing someone such as Pereira, those sharp punches are going to be more effective than what he's seen already. So I think this is really going to be a tough test for him. And even though this is a 5-round fight, I really doubt this is going to go the distance just due to the styles of both fighters. So I think it is going to be mostly a stand-up fight unless there's some sort of surprise strategy. But since they are pretty evenly matched, I think this is going to be a really neat main event. But if I would have to make a prediction here, I probably would have to give the edge to Pereira. And my reasoning for that would be, even though I would say Pereira is just a little bit more active and has a little bit more momentum in terms of what he's done recently, I wouldn't say that really gives him the edge. I would say that what really gives Pereira an advantage in this is that he has had a lot more experience in terms of bigger headliner fights since he has joined the UFC. And even though Ankalaev has faced his fair share of opponents, I don't know if we've gotten that same level of attention in terms of the size of the event. So I think Pereira is maybe just going to be a little bit more comfortable with that, even though I'm sure Ankalaev is going to be well prepared and is going to have his moments in that fight. I think it is just a little bit different in terms of the energy, and Pereira has really shown great poise in doing that so far. So I think Pereira is going to get a mid to late knockout in this, but feel free to let me know your thoughts and predictions on these fights, and I'll see you later.